Chapter 61:27. As soon as these words came out, Di Bei Chen's line of sight shifted. Those deep eyes quietly filled with a trace of blood, with extreme hatred. All this while, he had been doing his best to facilitate this so that the despised dark attribute cultivators could have a place to live in peace. This was something that normal people did not need to fight for, but to them, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Even though he despised Lei Ming's cruelty, he never thought that he could be despicable to this extent. He actually planned to wipe out all the darkness attribute cultivators in one fell swoop. This was not giving them any chance to live at all. Bailey Hongzhuang also looked at Lei Ming in disbelief. This man was actually so cold-blooded? How could something so cruel and heinous in the eyes of others be so simple when it came out of his mouth? Diyu Jue and the others' expressions froze for a moment. When they came back to their senses, they could not help but feel annoyed. This guy is really shameless. Diyu Jue secretly spat. If it was said that he had some misgivings before, now that he was faced with this extremely cruel guy, he felt that he did not need to worry at all. This kind of person actually became the leader of a lightning-type guild? Are those people blind? Lin Wenlan's face was ashen. The veins on his temples bulged, revealing the anger in his heart. Do it. I'm going all out today. Ouyang Jifeng's eyes flashed with a trace of bloodlust. All these years, his elder brother had been unable to recover from the setback caused by the guild. No matter how much he comforted or advised him, it was useless. The inferiority that spread from the bottom of his heart made his heart ache. All these years, he had been working hard so that he could become the family's young master. He hoped that one day he would be able to do his best to change everything. However, now this guy actually wanted to wipe out all the dark attribute cultivators. So, once they succeeded, would his elder brother really not be able to see the light of day in the future? These cruel bastards. He would never allow it. Do it. Ouyang Jifeng suddenly spoke. His calm voice was as terrifying as death. Similarly, there was no emotion in it at all, only cruelty. The sudden voice attracted everyone's attention. When they saw Ouyang Jifeng suddenly speak, everyone felt that it was a little strange. They never thought that Ouyang Jifeng would be so hostile towards the dark attribute cultivators. This was not in line with his usual personality. Xiao Yanlong and Jun Hongqing looked at each other and smiled, then stood up at the same time. Initially, they had been worried that they would appear cruel if they stood up immediately. Now that Ouyang Jifeng had taken the lead, they no longer had to worry. Kill all the dark attribute cultivators. The cultivators from the Xiao and Jun had been waiting. Once they heard the master's command, they all immediately rushed to attack. Di Bei Chen heard the voice and looked at Xiao Yanlong. His bloodthirsty eyes were filled with extreme coldness, and his voice suppressed an extreme storm. Xiao family, Jun family, as long as I don't die today, I will slaughter your entire families and leave no one alive. Every word was dripping with blood, causing everyone's hearts to tremble. Xiao Yanlong turned his head and met a pair of bottomless eyes. The murderous intent that seeped out from those eyes sent chills down one's spine. It was as if they were being stared at by a demon, making it difficult for them to breathe. Ouyang Jifeng's gaze turned slightly. The hatred in his eyes was just as strong. Kill all those who attack the dark attribute cultivators. Chapter 61:28. So, he wasn't targeting darkness-type cultivators? His target was actually the members of the association. Was he crazy? Everyone present was stupefied. Normally, they did not know that Ouyang Jifeng and Di Bei Chen had such a good personal relationship. They were actually supporting Di Bei Chen at a time like this. This was equivalent to throwing their entire family into this. Jiang Wenyan, Murong Jing, and Chen Feng exchanged glances. This scene was also outside of their expectations. Fight. What are you still hesitating for? Murong Jing shouted, his face filled with determination as he pressed forward courageously. If I don't attack at a time like this, how can I still be brothers? Jiang Wenyan's eyes were bloodshot as his gaze became exceptionally deep. The next second, a bright and dazzling smile bloomed on his lips. He suddenly stood up and said, "Members of the Jiang family, listen up. From now on, I am no longer the young master of the Jiang family. I am only me. Everything I do represents my own will. It has nothing to do with the Jiang family." As he finished speaking, he charged toward the group of dark attribute cultivators without hesitation. "I'm sorry. I am the young master of the Jiang family. I cannot implicate the entire family because of my own actions, because the family is equally important in my heart. The only thing I can do is to fight with you until the end, brother." All the cultivators of the Jiang family were dumbstruck as they saw the young master's action. Normally, their young master was always calm and wise in their eyes. However, ever since they got to know Di Beichen, they found that their young master had changed a lot. In the face of such a young master, they could not say anything to criticize him. "Brother, from now on, I am no longer a member of the Jiang family. I only wish to fight with the young master." Suddenly, a cultivator of the Jiang family left behind this sentence and similarly charged into the crowd. They were clear that with their strength alone, it was impossible to stop the 5 great guilds. That was because the strength of the 5 great guilds was incomparably terrifying. However, there were certain things that a gentleman should and should not do. Some things were more important than one's life. "I am also not a member of the Jiang family." After the first person said this, the others followed suit. They were unwilling to implicate the entire family because of their own actions. However, when faced with something like this, they had no choice but to do it. As Chen Feng looked at Jiang Wenyan and Murong Jing, who had already rushed in, a rare smile appeared on his face. This bunch of idiots! He was obviously going to die, but he still put on such a righteous appearance. However, he actually felt very happy. At the very least, compared to the indifference, selfishness, and exploitation of others, this kind of passion was what he yearned for. Di Beichen was his first true friend. Because of Di Beichen, he got to know Jiang Wenyan and Murong Jing. These people had clearly not known each other for long, but there was a mysterious power that made them willing to risk their lives for each other. In the next instant, he shouted, "Now, I am no longer the great devil Sek's eldest senior brother. I am Chen Feng." It was Di Beichen's brother. "Whoever goes against him is my enemy." As his voice faded, Chen Feng's body leaped as the origin energy within his body gushed out and attacked his opponent with surging killing intent. This sudden scene caused the 5 presidents on the high platform to be completely dumbfounded. Were these guys crazy? The Di family's defeat was already set, yet these guys still wanted to accompany Di Beichen to die. Chapter 61-29. What a joke. Lei Ming and the others felt that this was simply a joke. A scene that was normally impossible to happen was actually happening in front of them. Were these young people crazy? Xiao Sudong and Nangong Yuqing stared blankly at this scene. As early as when they were training, they already knew that Di Beichen and the others were extremely close. However, they had never taken this to heart. This was because the friendship between cultivators was linked to benefit. How could there be true friendship? Looking at the emotions of Jiang Wenyan and the others in front of them, they felt as if their hearts had been ruthlessly struck by something. Their hearts trembled. That kind of hot-bloodedness made them inexplicably envious. It was clearly an act of courting death, but why was there an indelible envy in their hearts? If they were in Di Beichen's shoes, they were afraid that no one would do such a thing, right? They were all too clear that no one would be willing to risk everything for them. Even if they stubbornly refused to admit it, they couldn't deceive themselves. This was the damn jealousy. Di Yujue and the others were also shocked, but more than that, they were happy. Unknowingly, Di Beichen actually had such sincere friends. If they could return alive today, these people would be the most precious people in Di Beichen's life. They would also be honored guests of his family forever. Di Baichen looked at Jiang Wenyan and the others who had appeared beside him. Something flashed in his eyes. After his heart trembled, it seemed that a kind of emotion had reached his eyes from the bottom of his heart, making him feel a little hot. "Brother, we're here." Murong Jing and the others laughed. Di Baichen's voice was hoarse. Hey, don't be too moved. After this, we'll definitely ruthlessly slaughter you." Jiang Wenyan chuckled, but this smile was more complicated than usual. "Okay." Di Baichen nodded. "After this, you can slaughter me however you want." Linger, by Li Yanche, Mo Yunjue, and Ao Lingshao had already joined the battle. Their swords rose and fell without the slightest mercy. Since they were destined to be opponents, they could only press forward. Even if there was no road ahead, they would still carve out a bloody path. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the familiar and young faces in front of her and felt an indescribable sense of pride. With so many people accompanying him on the road ahead, it was really a very happy thing. Right now, she didn't dare to imagine the outcome. All she could think about was how to deal with the opponent in front of her. After being influenced by Di Baichen and the others, the darkness attribute cultivators who were already hot-blooded became even more excited. With so many brothers together, what did they have to fear? On the other hand, the guild's cultivators could feel the overwhelming aura of the other party, and they could not help but feel a little scared. As soon as his aura weakened, he couldn't even display his usual strength. His cultivation was clearly higher than the other parties, but they were evenly matched. A bunch of lunatics. Lei Ming secretly spat. The scene in front of him made him very unhappy. His orders had always been obeyed and not disobeyed, but these people disobeyed his orders one after another, which made him extremely unhappy. "Since that's the case, all of you can go to hell." Lei Ming's figure flashed, and a tyrannical aura burst out. Without hesitation, he attacked a large group of darkness attribute cultivators. Bang! Chapter 6130. A mist of blood sprayed into the air, splashing onto the faces and bodies of Di Baichen and the others. Feeling the warm blood, everyone could not help but tremble. They looked up and saw that Lei Ming had personally made his move. The darkness-type cultivators had no way of retaliating against him. "Damn it!" When Xiren cursed. "This Lei Ming has really refreshed his understanding of shamelessness." Di Baichen's figure flashed and charged directly towards Lei Ming. He must stop Lei Ming. This fellow's power was much stronger than the darkness-type cultivators. As long as he made his move, no one would be able to resist at all. Even if it was just for a second, more lives would be lost at his hands. At the same time, Bailey Hongzhuang also flashed over and looked at Lei Ming with a serious expression. The only way to stop this was to control the 5 guild masters. Only then would they be able to control the situation. Di Yujue, Di Linxian, and Lin Wenlan naturally understood the situation very well. Hence, they had already made their way to the high platform. Now, they had thrown caution to the wind. After all, they were destined to be enemies. They had long forgotten each other's identities. Regardless of whether they made their move or not after this, both sides would be enemies. Luo Qinghao and the others naturally went up to meet them. This time, they had completely fallen out with the Di family and the Lin family. However, they were still very confident. The influence of a guild was limitless. It was absolutely impossible for a mere few families to stop them. "Head of the Di family, you've made the most unwise decision." Luo Qinghao stared coldly at Di Yujue. Di Yujue chuckled. "Your decision is also very unwise. You should know that families can disappear at any time, but guilds will never fall." "You're right." Di Yujue nodded calmly. Seeing this, Luo Qinghao was a little surprised. He did not think that Di Yujue would agree with him without hesitation. However, Di Yujue's next words made his face turn ashen. "Indeed, the guild will not fall, but the guild leader can be changed at any time. Unlike the Saint of Light, the guild master did not have to fulfill as many requirements as the Saint of Light. If a guild master fell, a new guild master would definitely take his place. So, you want to kill me? Diujue was non-committal. Same here. These guys bullied his son in front of him. How could he swallow this anger? Even if the D family had to pay a huge price, he was going to make these bastards disappear from this world. As the patriarch of an aristocratic family, he had seen the rise and fall of too many forces. People often thought that no one could replace them, but they didn't know that there were too many people who could replace them. How could a mere guild leader make him so nervous? He would never hesitate to kill. Seeing Diujue admit it so calmly, Luo Qinghao only felt as if there was a force strangling his neck. It was extremely uncomfortable and he couldn't breathe. All of them were F***king lunatics. Perverts. Diujue did not give Luo Qinghao any time to hesitate. He had to kill Luo Qinghao as soon as possible because Beichen was still under pressure from Lei Ming. He wanted to deal with Lei Ming directly, but this Luo Qinghao took the initiative to stand in front of him. Since this was the case, he could only kill him first. Luo Qinghao did not dare to relax. Diujue's strength was well known. He was definitely not weaker than him. Chapter 61-31. Stop! As Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang appeared in front of Lei Ming, he put away his hand and stared mockingly at the two young figures in front of him. You want to stop me? You're not qualified. A cultivator at the Heavenly Moon Realm could indeed look down on the heroes of the younger generation, but it was clearly not enough in front of elders like them. Which one of them was not a genius? Since they had lived for so many years, their cultivation was naturally not something that young people could compare to. Then let's try. Di Beichen narrowed his eyes and his expression was unprecedentedly serious. Previously, when he had exchanged blows with Lei Ming, he had already sensed the latter's terrifying aura. Indeed, based on his current level of power, it was indeed not enough. However, he only needed to buy time. As long as his father and the others could solve the problem at hand, they would come and help. Even if stalling for time was difficult, at least it was better than sacrificing so many innocent lives every second. Young master! Huang Fu-ting could not help but cry out. He understood that the young master's cultivation was much more powerful than theirs. However, he was still young after all. Against Lei Ming, he had no chance at all. Almost instinctively, Huang Fu-ting wanted to rush to Di Beichen's side. He was the god that they revered. However, the sounds of killing filled the sky and there were battlefields everywhere. The crowd around him had turned into a flood, so it was not easy for him to rush over. Hee. Lei Ming laughed impudently. However, in the next second, his smile suddenly disappeared and his gloomy face was filled with bloodlust and disgust. Coincidentally, I see that you're not very happy. I'll take this opportunity to send you to your death. As long as you're not around, these fellows are a bunch of loose sand. I don't have to worry about any unforeseen events. He was almost certain that if Di Beichen was allowed to continue developing, based on his methods, he would become an extremely terrifying existence in the future. Even if the Dark Sanctuary was not successfully established, based on these fellows' fanatical worship of Di Beichen, once they become his subordinates, Di Beichen's influence would be extremely terrifying in the future. Just like how Jiang Wenyan and the others were willing to give up these impossible things for him, there was something strange about this kid. If he was still alive, then the next person who could lead all the Dark-type cultivators to destroy the upper realm would be him. He could not allow such a person to continue to exist. As soon as he finished speaking, Lei Ming's palm suddenly struck out. This attack came without any warning. Di Beichen was the first to react, but it was too late to dodge. Left with no other choice, he could only take the blow head-on. Bang! Boundless energy waves spread out from where the two of them were clashing. The surrounding cultivators were affected by this energy wave, and it was as if there was a huge force pushing them away. In the blink of an eye, a vacuum was formed between Di Beichen and Lei Ming. Receiving this palm, Bei Chen's figure also retreated for a while. He retreated more than 10 meters before stopping his footstep. His handsome face was flushed red. He swallowed the sweet taste in his mouth and looked at Lei Ming with deep eyes. Sure enough, the difference in strength between them was really too great. Bei Chen. Bailey Hongzhuang rushed to Bei Chen's side and asked with concern, "How are you?" Lei Ming was determined to kill them. Naturally, he would not show any mercy when he attacked. An all-out attack was not easy to take. Bei Chen waved his hand, his gaze firm. "Don't worry, I'm fine." Chapter 61-32. They were at a disadvantage now. The longer the battle dragged on, the greater their losses would be. Therefore, the best solution was to end the battle as soon as possible. Observing the situation carefully, Yujue and the other elders were locked in a fierce battle with the 5 guild leaders. Being in a high position, their strength was naturally not to be underestimated. The stronger their strength, the longer it would take to determine the winner because both sides had their own trump card. However, for the darkness attribute cultivators who were not strong enough, they could lose their lives if they were not careful. The battle had only started for a short while, but there were already many cultivators who had fallen. Although many of them were cultivators from the guilds, there were more darkness attribute cultivators. Bei Chen, the 5 guilds have quite a number of people. We have to turn the situation around. Bailey Hongzhuang turned to look at Bei Chen. The suppression in numbers did not affect the high-level cultivators much, but it still had a huge impact on the outcome of the battle between ordinary cultivators. Bei Chen nodded. In the next moment, he raised his voice and said, "All darkness attribute cultivators, retreat to the back." The sudden order caused everyone present to feel strange. The battle was so intense right now. Was he planning to escape? Huang Fu Ting and the others did not understand the purpose of this order. However, they would definitely obey Bei Chen's order. Almost immediately, everyone subconsciously retreated to the back. The cultivators from the guilds were naturally unwilling to let the other party escape. After they reacted, they immediately chased after them. However, for Bei Chen, even if it was only a short time, it was enough. His hands flipped rapidly, and a complicated seal appeared. Trap array. A huge trap array suddenly appeared, enveloping the cultivators from the guilds. The moment Bei Chen set up the array, Bailey Hongzhuang's figure flew out and threw the poison powder in her hand into the array. The white powder fluttered in the air and drifted among the cultivators. The people who were chasing suddenly realized that there was an invisible wall in front of them, blocking their path. There was no way for them to cross it. Most importantly, the poisonous powder that appeared right after made it impossible for them to escape. Array formation? Lei Ming's pupils constricted, and his voice was filled with unconcealable surprise. She had always heard that Bailey Hongzhuang had many tricks up her sleeves, but she never knew that Bei Chen was actually an array master. Nangong Yuqing looked at the trapped people in front of him, and his mood became even more complicated. He remembered that he had seen Bei Chen use a formation in the Immortal Cloud secret realm. Under that terrible attack, it was only by relying on Bei Chen's array that they were able to survive that difficult period of time and save their lives. Now that Bei Chen once again displayed the array formation, the scale of this array formation was much stronger than before. It could be seen that Bei Chen's array formation had improved a lot during this period of time. After the group of cultivators were trapped, they immediately launched their attacks at the array formation. As long as they could break this array formation, they would be able to escape. Bailey Hongzhuang was the most outstanding doctor in the upper realm, so the effects of the poison powder she had concocted were naturally not to be underestimated. No one dared to stay here for too long. If they stayed for even a moment longer, they might lose their lives. Chapter 61-33. Under the frenzied bombardment of the cultivators, ripples began to appear at the edges of the trapping array. Clearly, the trapping array could not suppress everyone for too long. Although the effects of my poison aren't bad, there's no wind in the trapping array, so the spread speed is slower. I can only kill a portion of them. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression remained solemn. She was very clear about the effects of her poison. These cultivators were not weak and had a certain level of resistance to the poison. However, the cultivators at the front would not be able to keep their lives. We have to hurry. His handsome face was filled with an unprecedented seriousness. In a race against time like this, every second had to be fought for. All darkness-type cultivators, transfer your darkness-type energy to me, Di Beichen shouted. All the darkness-type cultivators immediately surrounded Di Beichen. No one understood what Di Beichen was trying to do. Even if Di Beichen needed their power, they did not hesitate. Huang Futing placed his hand on the back of Di Beichen's hand. One cultivator after another passed on their power in the same way. Has Di Beichen gone mad? Doesn't he know how dangerous this is? Luo Qinghao and the others had also noticed the changes in the battlefield while they were fighting. Most importantly, this scene was too shocking. There were already quite a number of darkness-type cultivators. At this moment, everyone had gathered together and transferred their power to Di Beichen. How terrifying would the power that Di Beichen had gathered be? However, they were not too worried about how much power Di Beichen would release. This was because this method of transferring power was not easy to carry out. Unless there was an absolute tacit understanding between the cultivators, transferring power into each other's body would only cause the other's power to become chaotic. Not to mention how complicated the current environment was, just the fact that there were so many cultivators. How was it possible for all of them to have no distracting thoughts and completely trust each other? This was something that was impossible to accomplish in the first place. The cultivators who were originally sitting below the high platform did not leave. Instead, they retreated some distance before coming back to watch the battle. This result was extremely important to the entire upper realm. Xiao Sudong looked at the pitch-black darkness in front of him. His mood was extremely complicated. At the very least, Di Beichen's courage was unparalleled among the younger generation. If it were him, he wouldn't dare to do such a thing. As the energy continued to flow into Di Beichen's body, Lei Ming could sense that Di Beichen's aura was gradually rising. This kind of improvement was very fast, and even he could not help but feel shocked by the surging power. How is this possible? Lei Ming was dumbfounded. With so many cultivators, it was already good enough that they didn't suffer from qi deviation when transmitting their powers together. However, they actually did it. They transferred endless dark energy to Di Beichen, increasing the power that Di Beichen could control. This kind of thing that seemed impossible to others was actually happening right in front of him. The more outstanding Di Beichen's performance was, the more he felt that he could not let this child live. Otherwise, it would definitely cause immeasurable trouble in the future. Chapter 61-34. Even until now, he still did not understand what Di Beichen was planning to do by accumulating so much power. However, he vaguely had an ominous premonition, as if what Di Beichen was about to do was very frightening. As the president of the Lightning Attribute Guild, he had walked on the edge of life and death many times. Naturally, he had a premonition of danger. Originally, with Di Beichen's cultivation, he should not have been a threat to him. However, now that he had sensed something, it was very frightening. In the next moment, Lei Ming charged directly towards Di Beichen, who was in the crowd. He wanted to stop everything. As long as Di Beichen's breathing was unstable and he went berserk, everything would be over. Once Di Beichen fell, then all the people who had gathered here would have no meaning. This was because these people were all connected with Di Beichen as the center. After seeing Lei Ming's actions, Bailey Hongzhuang's figure flashed and blocked Lei Ming's path. A dazzling smile appeared on her delicate face. Her serene eyes were unfathomable, vaguely revealing extreme coldness and murderous intent. President Lei, your opponent now is me. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's sudden appearance, Lei Ming's eyes narrowed and a ruthless light flashed across them. Bailey Hongzhuang, I'm giving you some face because you're the saint of the light. Don't be so shameless. When President Liu had returned yesterday, he had clearly told everyone that he had never agreed to Bailey Hongzhuang's resignation from her position as the Saint of the Light. As long as Bailey Hongzhuang was alive, she would always be the Saint of the Light. This was something that would never change. Therefore, he did not want to kill Bailey Hongzhuang. Otherwise, President Liu would definitely fly into a rage and things would become even more difficult to deal with. Bailey Hongzhuang laughed softly. I don't need you to give me any face at all because you're not even human in my eyes. In the past, when she first came into contact with the power of darkness and saw the skeleton army, she felt that these guys were cold, heartless, and cruel. However, after meeting Lei Ming, she realized that some sanctimonious people were the real beast. Among those skeletons, it was unknown how many had lost their lives because of the selfish actions of these fellows. Bailey Hongzhuang's words were fierce and did not give Lei Ming any face at all. She had completely angered Lei Ming. Since you're courting death, I'll send you on your way. Lei Ming ruthlessly attacked Bailey Hongzhuang with his palm. He would kill Bailey Hongzhuang first as interest. Bailey Hongzhuang's figure flashed. Her toes touched the ground, and her body flew back as light as a swallow. As Bailey Hongzhuang dodged the attack and landed on the ground, Thunder realized that a mysterious black and red door had opened behind Bailey Hongzhuang. This door appeared out of nowhere on the ground, exuding a terrifying aura that made one's heart palpitate. Even if it was him, he could not help but tremble from this aura. What kind of method was this? Lei Ming was dumbfounded. No matter if it was Di Beichen or Bailey Hongzhuang, he could not understand the methods that these two people had used. Roar! An earth-shattering roar sounded from within the door. Following that, a huge and mighty figure appeared in everyone's line of sight. It was a terrifying demonic beast that no one had ever seen before. Chapter 61:35. Hard black scales covered his body. His body was obviously huge, but he didn't look clumsy at all. On the contrary, his smooth lines and muscular body revealed his explosive strength. Roar! With a loud roar, it opened its ferocious mouth, revealing razor-sharp teeth that made one's heart tremble. At this moment, everyone couldn't help but look at this ancient beast. There was only one thought in their minds: it was too terrifying. What kind of demonic beast is this? Nangong Yuqing couldn't help but look at the elders of his family. According to his understanding of demonic beasts, he had never seen any description of them. Hearing Nangong Yuqing's question, the Nangong family head shook his head with a pale face. This demonic beast. I've never heard of it. After the end of the Immortal Cloud Secret Realm, the Nangong family head understood from Nangong Yuqing's description that Bailey Hongzhuang had a method that no one else had. She knew summoning techniques. She could summon powerful demonic beasts to fight. When he first heard this, although he was surprised by this method, he didn't take it to heart. This was because even if they didn't know how it was done, no matter what kind of martial technique it was, there would always be some side effects when one fought someone of a higher cultivation level. It was definitely not easy for Bailey Hongzhuang to use all of this. Moreover, the demonic beast she summoned wouldn't be much stronger than her. It wasn't until he saw this scene with his own eyes that he realized how stupid his previous judgment was. This kind of power was beyond their understanding. It turned out that this world had so many methods that they didn't know about. I've never heard of it either. The Chu family head couldn't help but say. At this moment, they didn't care if they would lose face or not. All of this had brought them too much shock. Hongzhuang, good job. Shangguan Yingying's face was full of excitement. Among all the women, she admired Bailey Hongzhuang the most. This kind of ability was enough to leave a group of self-proclaimed geniuses in the dust. Huang Fu Ting and the others were also shocked by this scene. Looking at the mountain-like demonic beast, they couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. They thought that the madam they knew was already very abnormal, but now it seemed that they were still too naive. The real madam wasn't a human, but a god. "Sister, I'm coming too." Bailey Yenche leapt to Bailey Hongzhuang's side, his handsome, almost demonic face exuding a heart-stopping beauty. The corners of his lips rose slightly, and in the next moment, in front of everyone's eyes, his figure suddenly changed. Roar! It was also a heaven-shaking roar. By Li Yan's roar, the roar of the demonic beast's roar and majesty. This demonic beast's demonic beast's roar. Demonic beast's demonic beast's. As for the demonic beasts that were flying in the air, they were in an even more miserable state. They were originally proudly fighting for their masters when they suddenly heard the Beast King's voice, which was filled with endless deterrence. For a moment, they couldn't even control their flight. Their bodies fell from the sky, and like the other demonic beasts, they submitted to Bai Li Yen Che. Chapter 6136. Please enter the text. This sudden turn of events once again shocked everyone present. They had never seen such a scene of thousands of beasts worshipping before. Some cultivators tried their best to control their contracted beasts to stand up, but at this moment, they seemed to have lost control of their contracted beasts. The contracted beasts turned a deaf ear to their commands. How could this be? Everyone looked at each other in dismay. They had been with their contracted beasts for so long, and this had never happened before. At this moment, it was as if these beasts were no longer their contracted beasts. Immediately after, everyone realized that the originally extremely handsome Bai Li Yen Che had transformed into a mystical beast. This mystical beast was also one that everyone had never seen before. Its body was not as large as a mountain, but it was still an awe-inspiring existence. Its black and white fur covered its entire body. Its soft and shiny fur was like a work of art. Its streamlined lines were filled with explosive power. It was just standing quietly beside Bailey Hongzhuang, but a noble and supreme aura was already exuding from it. On its forehead, a majestic and dazzling king word appeared clearly on its head, exuding endless majesty and awe. Beast King. After a short moment of shock, everyone immediately recognized its identity. Such a noble aura and the deterrence of a king made all the mystical beasts willingly submit to it. Apart from the Beast King, no other mystical beast could do this. In the early years, there were people who knew that Bailey Hongzhuang's contracted beast was not simple. There were also people who recognized the identity of the Beast King, but because they had never seen White Lion in action, everyone did not pay too much attention to it. At this moment, when this scene truly appeared in front of everyone, they finally realized how terrifying the Beast King was. And Bailey Hongzhuang had a Beast King as her contracted beast. How enviable was that? It's actually the Beast King. Lei Ming stared blankly at that figure. At this moment, he did not know what words to use to express the shock he had received today. It was already a rare sight to be able to witness one of these shocking scenes on a normal day. However, today, it was happening one after another without stopping. As the guild leader of the Thunder Attribute Guild, he had always felt that he was knowledgeable. Even in the entire upper realm, there were not many people who were more knowledgeable than him. It was just a few youngsters in front of him, but they had already refreshed his understanding. Aren't these youngsters' luck a little too good? As expected of Bailey Hongzhuang. What a pervert! Chu Yingming couldn't help but sigh with emotion. He had already seen how powerful Bailey Hongzhuang was. This woman was truly gifted. Her ability had always been inferior to any man, and she was already terrifyingly strong. Father, who do you think will win today? Suddenly, Chu Yingming turned to look at Chu Yifeng. Chu Yifeng stared at Chu Yingming. With his understanding of his son, with just this question, he had already guessed his son's thoughts. Could it be that you want to? Chu Yingming nodded. Father, if your thoughts are the same as mine, then stepping forward at this time will be the best way to obtain their friendship. The icing on the cake would never leave a lasting impression on others. Only providing help in times of need was a true friendship. Chapter 61-37. Please enter the main text. Jiang Wenyan, Murong Jing, and Chen Feng. He had known these three for many years. Before meeting Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang, they were never people who ignored the big picture. However, after seeing them rush out, he felt that there was nothing wrong with their actions. Perhaps everyone believed that such a battle would be won by the 5 great guilds. However, as a youngster, he felt that nothing was impossible to overturn. As long as these 5 guild leaders were dead, the new guild leaders might not necessarily oppose all this. Moreover, hadn't the previous situation been clearly explained? Based on the change in expression of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, it was clear that President Liu and President Song had agreed to this. However, something had happened that they didn't know about. It was definitely related to the 5 guild leaders. Even if the 5 guild leaders didn't all die, as long as 2 new guild leaders with different opinions were born, the situation would be completely reversed. Although this gamble was risky, if they succeeded, the benefits they would reap would not be small. He had some understanding of the Di family's character. Moreover, Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang were not people who would forget righteousness at the sight of benefits. They were tired of the hypocrisy between the family and their allies. If one day something really happened to the Chu family, would those allies really stand out to help them? From today's situation, it could be seen. However, if they stood out at this time, the Di family would definitely stand out to help them. That was the most important thing, wasn't it? Chu Yifeng looked at his son's resolute gaze and hesitation appeared on his face. Yingming, this matter is not as simple as you think. If we make a mistake, the Chu family will be consigned to eternal damnation. Chu Yingming looked at the scene in front of him, and a confident smile appeared on his face. Although Di Beichen and the others don't have the advantage, I feel that they will win. Facing a huge demon beast and a beast king that he had never seen before, Lei Ming's expression was somewhat unsightly. The beast king's deterrence was not fake. Even as a human, he could feel that terrifying deterrence. The only thing worth rejoicing about was that the beast king's current strength was still not enough. Otherwise, today's situation would have been very dangerous. However, the appearance of the Beast King directly suppressed all the demon beasts on their side, making them unable to do anything. Helpless, Lei Ming could only say, "Recall all the demon beasts." The group of cultivators couldn't help but recall their contracted beasts. That shivering appearance of theirs made them look like cowards. It was too shameful. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes rippled with a sneer. From the moment they decided to establish the Dark Sacred Assembly, they had already prepared for the worst war. Therefore, even if it really happened, they wouldn't be completely flustered. The only thing they didn't expect was that Lei Ming intended to kill all the Darkness Attribute cultivators. However, this had also strengthened their resolve to establish the Sacred Assembly. Just as Lei Ming was about to make a move, a cold voice suddenly sounded out. "I'm coming." Ling Er's elegant figure appeared in everyone's line of sight. However, she didn't waste any time and directly transformed into her dragon form in midair. In the sky, a huge white dragon circled around, contrasting against the blue sky and white clouds. Its figure was so beautiful, but the power it emitted was equally terrifying. Heavens, it's a real dragon! Bailey Hongzhuang's 2 contracted beasts are actually so abnormal. Chapter 61-38. As they stared at the demonic beasts in the sky and on the ground, the crowd was at a loss for words. As cultivators who have been heavily nurtured by their families, they all have pretty good contracted beasts. However, in the face of Bailey Hongzhuang's 2 contracted beasts, they had been reduced to dregs in an instant. The fact that a beast king had become a contracted beast was already an inconceivable thing to everyone. Similarly, Only a few top-notch cultivators have been able to turn a dragon into a contracted beast. Aside from reading about this in ancient books, no one has ever seen this happen before. The Dragon Clan was a very powerful clan and would not stoop so low as to become a contracted beast of a human. Normally, it was already very difficult to even meet a Dragon Clan member, what more to make one a contracted beast. However, something like this had happened and all of them were Bailey Hongzhuang's contracted beasts. How could they not be envious? Forget about the other organizations, even the D family and the Lin family were shocked by this. This was because when Ling had first appeared, she had always been in her human form. Furthermore, based on the way she interacted with Bailey Hongzhuang, no one would have thought that she would actually be a contracted beast. That's really awesome. Jiang Wenyan laughed softly. In the past, he had never felt that he could not compare to a woman until he met Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang silently glanced at Di Beichen, who was standing behind the demonic beasts. At this moment, Di Beichen was preparing for the most important step. He must not be disturbed at all. Then, she noticed that the trapping array was becoming weaker and weaker under the cultivators' attacks. It looked like it was going to collapse at any moment. At the same time, a large number of cultivators had fallen in the trapping array. However, once these cultivators break free, they would immediately attack the Dark-type cultivators. Hence, before Di Beichen completes his task, she must stall for time and stop him. How could Lei Ming not see through Bailey Hongzhuang's plan? After seeing Bai Shi and the others reveal their identities, he realized that Bailey Hongzhuang was most likely stalling for time. He had to destroy everything as soon as possible. Bailey Hongzhuang sensed the powerful aura coming from the front and ordered, "Go!" This contract beast was a demonic beast that she had summoned after her strength had increased. Now, with the improvement of her cultivation base, her spiritual sense was also constantly improving. She was very clear that in this kind of battle, what really mattered was strength and not quantity, so she used all her strength to summon the strongest demonic beast. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the demonic beast charged towards Lei Ming. Its huge eyes were filled with endless vicissitudes and indifference. The human in front of it was an eyesore to it. A fly like this should be swatted to death. As the giant beast began to move, everyone felt the ground tremble. With every step it took, the ground trembled, but strangely, its speed was not slow at all. Bang! Lei Ming's palm landed on the giant beast's body. He wanted to see how strong this giant beast was. After receiving Lei Ming's attack, a hint of emotion appeared in the giant beast's eyes. As if it could feel the pain, the giant beast roared and stared at Lei Ming with a vicious look in its eyes. Slap! The giant beast swung its large palm. Even though Lei Ming did not receive the attack head-on, the residual force was still very uncomfortable for him. Chapter 6139. Lei Ming retreated dozens of meters, his feet touching the ground repeatedly before he came to a stop. "Guild Master Lei, are you all right?" Feng Yuxian looked at Lei Ming worriedly, her eyes filled with worry. Lei Ming raised his hand and said with a pale face, "I'm fine." Although he did not suffer any serious injuries, the attack just now was enough to make him lose face. What kind of monster is this? How could it be so powerful? Lei Ming kept thinking. He had no understanding of the monster's habits and could not find its weakness. Naturally, it would be more difficult to deal with it. As the giant monster moved, he once again saw Di Beichen's situation clearly. Di Beichen's hands were constantly moving, and one by one, mysterious and complex seals quietly appeared. These hand seals were different from the hand seals used to execute martial skills. They carried a type of profound and special energy, like obscure and difficult to understand runes, or a type of special profundity that far exceeded the scope of their understanding. Dense dark energy lingered around Di Beichen, and all the dark attribute cultivators seemed to have fallen into a strange environment. Was it funny? They were clearly in the middle of a battle, but these people could enter such a mysterious state. No matter what Di Baichen was planning, he had to break it. However, his strength alone was not enough. With that thought, Lei Ming turned to look at Xiao Yanlong and Jun Hongqing behind him and said, "What are you hesitating for? Why aren't you making a move?" Although the cultivators from the Xiao and Jun families had already attacked, Xiao Yanlong and Jun Hongqing did not make a move. After all, the two of them were the heads of aristocratic families. It was not right for them to get involved in a battle between guilds. However, after hearing Lei Ming's call, the two of them no longer hesitated. Their figures flashed and appeared beside Lei Ming. "Family head Xiao, family head Jun, all of our guilds will remember your sacrifice today," Thunder said. "Guild Master Lei, you're too kind." Xiao Yanlong was full of smiles. "No matter what you need us to do, we'll do our best. I'll block this giant monster. You guys find a way to break Di Baichen's trick." Lei Ming lowered his voice. "This Di Baichen is very strange. I don't know what kind of sorcery he's using. If he succeeds, I'm afraid it'll be very troublesome. Don't worry, leave this to us." A trace of hatred appeared in Jun Hongqing's eyes. He was more than willing to leave this matter to him. His son had died at Di Baichen's hands, and he had always wanted revenge. Now that the opportunity was in front of him, was it not? Lei Ming heaved a sigh of relief. With two more helpers, the pressure on them would undoubtedly be reduced by a great deal. Of course. Today. Looking at the old and ferocious face in front of her, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with disgust. This old fellow has always been a stumbling block on their path. He goes back on his words, uses all sorts of tricks, and is extremely despicable. "Master Xiao, why isn't Xiao So here this time?" Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly sneered. "If my calculations are correct, Xiao So should be 5 months pregnant by now, right?" Once she said that, Xiao Yanlong's expression changed. He rebuked her angrily. "What nonsense are you spouting?" Chapter 6140. She had never liked to tear down a person's last layer of cloth, but when she met someone who was completely shameless, she would find that such an action was simply superfluous. It would be a waste to give such a person face. When everyone present heard Bailey Hongzhuang's words, they were suddenly shocked. "I haven't seen Xiao So for 2 days. I thought it was very strange, but I didn't expect that there would be such a thing. 5 months? Carefully calculating the time, it matches the time in the ancient battlefield. But in the ancient battlefield, could it be that Jun Lingxuan's body was already possessed? Could it be that Xiao So was already pregnant when she entered the ancient battlefield? Or the cultivators who had been to the ancient battlefield were all imagining things at this moment because the time was too sensitive. Nangong Yuqing felt as if he had been hit by a heavy blow. He thought that Jun Lingxuan wouldn't come back and that there would be infinite possibilities between him and Xiao So, but he didn't expect to hear this news. Even if he hated Bailey Hongzhuang, he also understood that the latter had never spread rumors about this kind of thing. If all of this was true, then counting the days, Nangong Yuqing's face suddenly turned pale, as if he couldn't believe what he had guessed. Hearing the discussions in the audience, Xiao Yanlong couldn't help but feel anxious. "So has been in seclusion recently. I don't know where you heard this nonsense from." "Is that so?" Bailey Hongzhuang chuckled. "I don't know what she is doing in seclusion. Why has she been in seclusion for so long?" After saying that, Bailey Hongzhuang turned her gaze to Jun Hongqing, family head Jun. "I don't know if you know that Jun Lingxuan's body was already possessed not long after he entered the ancient battlefield?" Jun Hongqing was stunned. He had heard this news from other people, but with Xiao So and Xiao Yanlong's assurance, he had never doubted it. However, looking at the young people below the stage who seemed to be deep in thought, he suddenly felt that he had made a mistake somewhere. Someone as calculative as Jun Hongqing only needed to do a casual calculation to understand the real reason for everyone's behavior. His heart felt as if it had been stabbed by a sharp sword, and an indescribable fear spread in his heart. If all of this was true, then it was too terrifying. Xiao Yanlong noticed the change in Jun Hongcheng's expression and hurriedly explained, "Brother Jun, don't be instigated by her words. It's not what you think it is." He never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would say something like that at this moment. But he had to admit that her words were indeed lethal. In just a short moment, Jun Hongcheng's eyes were bloodshot. He stared at Xiao Yanlong and did not answer the question. Instead, he directly said, "Kill them first. For the future of the Jun family, the Di family and the Lin family must be destroyed today. As for the other matters, he would understand them properly when he gets back." Xiao Yanlong's heart thumped when he noticed the look on Jun Hongcheng's face. If this had been in the past, only Bailey Hongzhuang had said that and Jun Hongcheng would not have believed it. However, the reactions of so many people present had undoubtedly supported Bailey Hongzhuang. He really needed to think of a way. "Bailey Hongzhuang, I'm going to kill you." Chapter 6141. Regardless of whether Bailey Hongzhuang was telling the truth or not, it was unforgivable for her to say such words in front of so many people. Seeing Jun Hongcheng's performance, Bailey Hongzhuang was not surprised. Perhaps to Jun Hongcheng, the truth was not as important as his reputation. But it was because of his unscrupulous methods that his family had fallen into such a state. Jun Hongcheng waved his hand and the vigorous metal attribute energy transformed into a sharp sword, enveloping Bailey Hongzhuang's vital points. He wanted to see just how strong this girl was. She had always been a stumbling block in their family's path forward. This time, he would completely remove this obstacle. Looking at the sharp sword aura, Bailey Hongzhuang held the thoughts-severing sword in her hand and was not afraid in the slightest. She raised her right hand slightly, and the sharp sword in her hand flashed, and an almost invisible ray of light suddenly swept out. Some people did not even see that ray of light clearly, but they saw that the sharp sword formed by Jun Hongcheng's energy had actually shattered in midair. Following that, Jun Hongcheng's body leaned to the side, as if he was dodging an attack. Seeing this scene, everyone looked at each other in dismay. The exchange just now had happened too quickly, and they had not seen what had happened clearly. Jun Hongcheng's eyes flashed with a trace of astonishment. When he looked at Bailey Hongzhuang again, the resentment in his eyes was even more intense. This girl was obviously not of the metal attribute, but the sword aura that she had condensed was actually so strong. Even he had to be careful of this terrifying sword aura. This sword aura was like that of a master swordsman who had gone through thousands of tempering to condense an incomparably solid sword aura. It was obviously just a simple sword aura, but its destructive power was not at all as simple as a killing move condensed by an ordinary cultivator. No wonder his son had been defeated by them one after another. This Bailey Hongzhuang was indeed strange. Bailey Hongzhuang's movements did not stop because of this. Previously in the abandoned immortal forest, they had spent a very long time practicing this move. Fortunately, this result was also gratifying. At least, in terms of sword aura, even Jun Hongcheng was no match for her. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. She waved her long sword and streaks of terrifying sword aura continuously shot out like a storm towards Jun Hongcheng's vital points. Jun Hongcheng did not dare to underestimate it. The energy in his body surged out and formed a barrier to block Bailey Hongzhuang's attack. However, the sword aura was simply too fierce and its penetrating power was too terrifying. Therefore, Jun Hongcheng could only condense another barrier to stack it. Only then could he block the endless sword aura that was constantly shooting towards him. As a joke. Of the family, of course, as the head of the family. As the head. So the head of the Jun family's strength is actually so weak? I thought that Bailey Hongzhuang was in danger, but now it seems that the situation is not the case. The head of the Jun family was exaggerating, but I never thought that he only has this much strength. No wonder the Jun family is declining. The crowd sighed and shook their heads. This kind of anticlimactic situation was too much of a slap in the face. Faced with the crowd's mockery, Jun Hongqing could not say anything. If these people were in his situation, they would know what kind of feeling this was. Chapter 6142. Xiao Yanlong was the closest to them. He understood Jun Hongqing's difficult situation. However, no one would believe him if he were to tell them about this. Initially, he had wanted to help Jun Hongqing. However, under the current circumstances, if he were to help, he would be ridiculed by the crowd as well. For the sake of his own reputation, he decided to target Bai Lianche and Ling instead. Even though these two fellows' cultivation levels were not very high, one had to admit that the Beast King and the Dragon Clan's powers were not to be underestimated. Ling and Bai Lianche looked at each other. Without any hesitation, both of them charged forward. Boom! The divine dragon swings its tail. It swept wildly with an extremely violent force. The crowd felt as if a hurricane had swept past them. Xiao Yanlong's figure flashed. The Dragon Clan's most terrifying aspect was their power. The dragon's tail was the most powerful part of their body. Once he was swept by the tail, even with his powers, he would not feel good. Just as Xiao Yanlong had dodged Ling Er's attack, Bai Lianche's attack was as swift as lightning. It pounced forward like a cheetah. Its cold, sharp teeth seemed as if they could bite Xiao Yanlong's neck off at any time. It emitted a terrifying chill. As the master of an aristocratic family, Xiao Yanlong's powers were naturally not to be underestimated. After a brief moment of shock, he regained his senses. The two mystical beasts' combat powers were not to be underestimated, but his methods were not to be underestimated either. Compared to Di Beichen's killing move, they had to destroy it as soon as possible. Vigorous primary energy exploded from Xiao Yanlong's body, and the power of the wood attribute suddenly appeared. A green, lustrous power appeared in his hand. At that moment, the crowd felt as if a life force was circling around Xiao Yanlong. The wood attribute was not the most powerful among the many attributes. However, each type of power had its own unique characteristic. Once used properly, the wood attribute was also a very difficult attribute to deal with. Rustle, rustle, rustle. Countless vines surged out from under Xiao Yanlong's feet and circled around his body. It was as if there were countless hands, a group of demons dancing wildly. Xiao Yanlong narrowed his eyes, and the vines directly rushed towards Bai Lianche. It was clearly a vine, but when it moved forward, it was like a nimble snake. Its speed was astonishing. Looking at the vines, Bai Lianche's gaze also became a bit more serious. He had seen such vines before. Back in the immortal cloud mystic realm, there was a strange tree full of such vines. Once entangled, not only would he be unable to move, he might even be strangled to death. Rustle, rustle, rustle. The vines were like flexible hands, constantly attacking Bai Lianche. Helpless, Bai Lianche could only carefully avoid these vines. This was because once he tripped over one of the vines, there would be countless vines that would wrap around him. With the tenacity of these vines, it was too difficult to break them. Bailey Hongzhuang noticed the countless vines behind Xiao Yanlong and could not help but feel a chill run down her spine. She had seen wood attribute cultivators use this technique before, but compared to Xiao Yanlong's, it was like a small child in the presence of a great sorcerer. Whether it was the number of vines or their tenacity, it could not be compared. When Ling saw that Bai Lianche was unable to break through the vine's encirclement, she immediately swept her dragon tail again. The powerful force swept aside many of the vines, but at the same time, many of the vines had wrapped around her dragon tail. Xiao Yanlong's eyes were filled with a sinister look. The corners of his lips were slightly raised, and his smile was vicious and bloodthirsty. Chapter 6143. Ling who was in midair, felt a terrifying force coming from the dragon's tail. It was trying to pull her down from mid-air. She struggled with all her might, trying to shake off the vines. However, the vines' strength and tenacity were so shocking that she could not shake them off at all. More vines wrapped around her and continued to pull her down. The crowd was aghast when they saw this. How terrifying was the vine's strength to be able to pull the dragon down from mid-air. Bai Lian-che noticed the situation and a ruthless look appeared in its eyes. In the next moment its claws became even sharper, and a surging and terrifying power emerged from its claws. Bai Lian-che's figure quickly charged forward, and its claws attacked the vines that were pulling the dragon's tail. "You're overestimating yourself." Xiao Yanlong's eyes were filled with disdain. Mystical beasts were best at strength and defense. It would be easier for them to deal with cultivators of other attribute. However, when it came to wood-type cultivators, he could prevent them from getting close to him. Besides, he had been studying wood-type powers for many years. Unless it was a fire-type cultivator who was more powerful than him, most people would not be able to break through his attack. However, before the smile on Xiao Yanlong's face could fully bloom, he noticed that Bai Lian-che's claws had cut through his vines. Those sharp claws were like the sharpest blades in the world. How could this be? Xiao Yanlong was shocked. Even though he has never fought against a beast king, he has a lot of experience in fighting against mystical beasts. No mystical beast has ever been able to do this so easily. A smile appeared in Bai Lian-che's eyes when it saw the effect of its claws. Following the gradual increase in its cultivation, more and more of the things that were sealed in its memories had been revealed. A beast king's claws were the sharpest weapons. It was just that some control was still needed. How could it not be? Bai Lian-che sneered, and his figure quickly swept out. This time, he did not need to worry about these vines. Because, as long as he destroyed these vines before they completely entangled him, it would be enough to approach Xiao Yanlong. He quietly glanced at Linger and gave her a look. Linger nodded slightly, indicating that there was no problem. After receiving Ling-er's affirmation, Bai Lian-che's figure flew out quickly, and its claws quickly slashed through the vines. Bang bang bang! The vines were quickly cut off by Bai Lian-che's sharp claws and fell to the ground. They no longer had their previous flexibility and strength. Noticing this scene, Xiao Yanlong also realized that this move might not be able to have the effect he expected. He could only fight head-on. When he saw Bai Lian-che's figure rapidly approaching him, Xiao Yanlong's figure flashed. He had already witnessed how sharp Bai Lian-che's claws were. If they landed on his body, his flesh would definitely be badly mutilated. Therefore, he must not engage in close combat with Bai Lian-che. However, just as Xiao Yanlong was about to dodge Bai Lian-che's approaching figure, a force suddenly lifted him into the sky. Bang! The dragon's tail swept nimbly. After sweeping Xiao Yanlong's figure into the air, Linger immediately swept her tail at him. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Xiao Yanlong, who was in the air, did not have the time to leverage himself before he was swept away by the dragon's tail. Chapter 6144. In an instant, Xiao Yanlong drew out all the strength in his body and tried his best to stabilize himself in the air. When facing a beast king, one must avoid close combat. Otherwise, its sharp claws would not be easy to deal with. Bai Lian-che had also noticed Xiao Yanlong's actions, and his figure immediately flew out. This damned old man had been making things difficult for his sister these days. No matter what, he had to make him bleed. Everyone only saw a black and white light flash by and a trace of red appeared in the air, vaguely accompanied by Xiao Yanlong's scream. When the Beast King's figure reappeared in everyone's line of sight, they discovered a hideous wound on Xiao Yanlong's face. Sharp claws had cut through his skin, causing his flesh to be torn apart. It was a hideous and terrifying sight. His face seemed to be numb from the pain, and a strong smell of blood spread. Xiao Yanlong's gaze became more and more vicious. These people, who were nothing but ants in his eyes, had actually injured him. He wanted them all to pay the price. Patriarch Shao was actually injured by Li Yanche. As far as I know, Li Yanche is only at the heavenly moon stage. Patriarch Shao should at least be at the flowing sun stage, right? Nangong Yuqing was somewhat puzzled. Could it be that after transforming into a beast, one's strength would increase so much? Patriarch Nangong's face sank. Patriarch Shao just didn't expect them to be able to break through the vine. He was caught off guard and suffered such a loss. However, he is now completely enraged. What's next is his true strength. Nangong Yuqing tilted his head and curiously asked, "Father, who do you think will win?" Although the Beast King and the Dragon are peak existences among monster beasts, they are still young and haven't developed enough strength. If Xiao Yanlong attacks with all his strength, they will inevitably suffer. Nangong Yuqing understood. This was the right situation. Otherwise, it would be strange if the patriarch of an aristocratic family was so easily defeated. He had dealt with Di Baichen and the others for so long that he had some understanding of Li Yanche's strength. This was the right situation. Beast King, Dragon Clan. Xiao Yanlong's lips curled into a cold arc. "Today, I will have all of you die here." In the next moment, everyone noticed that Xiao Yanlong's aura had suddenly changed. The vigorous energy continued to spread. Even the cultivators who were watching from a distance could feel a terrifying aura, as if their lives were threatened. For a moment, many cultivators retreated again. They did not want to lose their lives just because they were spectators. Death requisition. Xiao Yanlong's aura suddenly became strange. The grass on the ground seemed to have lost its vitality in an instant. In the blink of an eye, it seemed to have gone through the process of germination and decay. As his life force was sucked away, Xiao Yanlong's aura became more and more terrifying. In the next moment, he suddenly stretched out his hands toward Li Yanche and Linger. "What move is this?" Xiao He was shocked. At this moment, Shi and Xiao Bai had grown in size and were blocking the cultivators in the trapping array. Before Di Bei Chen's trick was completed, they absolutely couldn't let these guys disturb him even a little bit. "I don't know, but it's very dangerous." Xiao Bai's expression became ugly. It had taken a lot of effort to gain the upper hand, but now it felt a terrible danger. Chapter 6145. Diyujue could not help but feel anxious when he saw Xiao Yanlong unleash such a technique. He and Xiao Yanlong had been allies for so many years, so naturally, he was very familiar with the latter's methods. The life requisition technique was Xiao Yanlong's greatest killer move, and it was also the move that made him famous. The power of the wood attribute meant that it was full of vitality. However, since it could bring out vitality, it could naturally extract vitality as well. This alone was a very terrifying technique. Once a cultivator was controlled by Xiao Yanlong and had their vitality extracted, then there was really no way to save the situation. When he had seen Xiao Yanlong join the battle, he had been very angry. As long as the Di family did not perish today, he would not care about their old friendship. The Xiao family and the Jun family, these two malignant tumors, must be uprooted. Xiao Yanlong stared coldly at Diyujue. "Despair, these little fellows will all die in my hands, not a single one will be left alive." Dijue's figure flashed, and he was ready to fight Xiao Yanlong head-on. However, Luo Qinghao was tightly entangled with Diyujue. In terms of strength, he was indeed no match for Diyujue. In a short period of time, he had been injured in many places. Fortunately, these injuries were not fatal. Once Xiao Yanlong had made a breakthrough, then the outcome of this battle would be decided. Therefore, no matter what, he could not let Diyujue take advantage of this opportunity to leave. Seeing that Luo Qinghao was like a dogskin plaster that he could not shake off, Dijue's eyes flashed fiercely. Bang! A palm landed fiercely on Luo Qinghao's chest. Luo Qinghao's expression changed abruptly. Under this palm, He felt as if his internal organs were about to be displaced. However, he could not let Dyujua leave. This was because the current situation was very delicate. If any unforeseen circumstances were to occur, he was worried that he would lose. Once he lost, then they would become a complete joke. Even if the guild would not be affected, as the guild master, he would not have the face to continue sitting in this position. Damn it! Seeing that Luo Qinghao was still unwilling to let go of him under such circumstances, Dyujua was furious, but there was nothing he could do. Luo Qinghao's strength was indeed inferior to his, but it was not easy to kill him. If there was not enough time, it was impossible to do so. Even though Bai Lianche and Linger had never come into contact with Luo Qinghao's moves, they knew that this move was not so easy to break after listening to Dyujua's words. "Be careful," Bai Lianche said. Linger nodded slightly, her gaze unprecedentedly serious. In fact, they had never underestimated the patriarchs of the aristocratic families. Just as the two of them were being cautious, a terrifying force suddenly came from the front, and the life force in their bodies seemed to be constantly being sucked away. The feeling of having one's life force being stripped away was extremely terrifying. It was as if one could sense the passing of one's life. It was horrifying. How can there be such a move? Bai Lianche's eyes were full of shock. He had come into contact with many methods on a daily basis, but there had never been a method that was so strange that it made people feel despair from the bottom of their hearts. Shangguan Yingying and the others rushed over when they saw this. Even if Xiao Yanlong's attack was not directed at them, but just standing beside Bai Lianche, they could feel the terrifying feeling. What should we do? Chapter 6146. When Ziren and Mo Yunjua had ugly expressions on their faces. This was also the first time they had encountered such a situation. Even though they had tried to use their primary energy to block it, they realized that it was completely useless. The life force in their bodies was constantly being sucked out. If this were to continue, they might even be sucked dry and turn into dried corpses. These fellows actually have the nerve to say that darkness-type cultivators are sinister and evil. Xiao Yanlong's move is the real sinister one. When Ziren was a little angry, the skeletons may look scary, but they were still able to fight against them. However, Xiao Yanlong's method was simply vicious to the extreme. "Ziren, come to me." Bailey Hongzhuang noticed Xiao Yanlong's situation and could not help but call out to Ziren. Ziren and Jun Hongqing were both metal-type cultivators. After cultivating in the abandoned immortal forest over the past few days, Ziren's attainments in the metal type had reached the limit. Even though their cultivation levels were not on the same level, it should not be a problem for them to block Jun Hongqing for a moment. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's voice, when Ziren's figure flashed and immediately appeared next to Bailey Hongzhuang. "I'll leave this to you. Hold him off for a while. I have to think of a way to break this move." Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was serious. When Ziren nodded, "All right." When Jun Hongqing saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had looked down on him and had casually handed him over to someone else to deal with, the anger in his heart rose. If it had not been for that strange sword energy, did she really think that he would have his hands and feet tied? If it had been anyone else, he could have easily slapped them to death. However, just as Jun Hongqing was about to tear Ziren to shreds, he was shocked to see that when Ziren had unleashed the same sword energy. In a split second, Jun Hongqing could not help but feel dazed for a moment. To be able to cultivate such a sword chi, one must have gone through a lot of tempering. It was definitely not something that could be easily cultivated. The fact that Bailey Hongzhuang had been able to reach this level of cultivation had already exceeded his expectations. However, now, a random, unknown fellow had appeared out of nowhere and was able to use this technique as well? When Shangguan Yingying saw that Ziren was dealing with Jun Hongqing alone, she couldn't help but feel worried. She immediately moved closer. At this moment, Jun Hongqing saw another woman unleash the same sword chi. Since when did such a sharp sword chi become an existence that could be found everywhere? Why did all three of them know how to do it? Xiren and Shangguan Yingying had no idea that their sword chi, which had been integrated into their instincts, had brought such a great shock to Junhong Cheng. None of these aristocratic family heads were easy to deal with, so they had to be careful when dealing with them. However, compared to Xiao Yanlong's situation, this Junhong Cheng seemed to be easier to deal with. However, they did not know that the power of this technique that Yu Hong had made them practice was not to be underestimated. Even if they were to fight against someone of a higher level, this technique would still bring great trouble to their opponent. When Bai Li Yanche and Linger noticed that the vitality in their bodies was fading away, they did not dare to stay any longer and immediately decided to run away. However, Xiao Yanlong's hands seemed to have an extremely terrifying suction force. No matter how they tried to run away, it was useless. Their bodies seemed to be fixed in place, and they could not move at all. When Bailey Hongzhuang got closer to Bai Li Yanche, she also felt this terrifying power. This was simply an undefeatable existence. Chapter 6147. Do you remember what Zhongli Mu taught us? Mo Yunjue suddenly asked. Hearing this, Bai Li Yanche seemed to have thought of something. The light calendar's power in his body quickly surged and formed a square-shaped barrier around his body. Initially, he had been resisting Xiao Yanlong's attack. Now, he was using all of his power to build a barrier. Under everyone's gaze, the barrier that enveloped Bai Li Yanche kept shrinking. As the barrier shrank, the aura coming from it became more and more shocking. The light that was released also became brighter and brighter. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with worry. She did not know if this would be effective. Previously, when Zhongli Mu had practiced this on the waterfall, they had also learned it. However, after a few seniors had appeared, they had deepened their guidance on this foundation. Since then, they had understood that if they could control this power to a certain extent, they could use the most condensed power to form a layer of armor on the surface of their body. The effect of an armor made from power was very strong. Most importantly, if one could condense their power to a certain extent, they would be invulnerable to swords and spears. After knowing this, everyone tried to practice it. This was because they knew that cultivating this point was not only used to make armor, but also to increase one's control over power. Previously, when they had practiced sword chi, everyone had already had a certain foundation. Therefore, when they practiced this point, everyone's speed was much faster than before. However, they did not know if this would be effective in blocking Xiao Yanlong's attack. Ling immediately transformed into her human form and landed on the ground. Vigorous light calendar's power covered her body. As this power continued to condense and shrink, it finally formed a human-shaped armor on the surface of her body. It's effective! A trace of a smile appeared in Bai Li Yanche's eyes. As the armor became more and more condensed, the life force that was being extracted also became less and less. In the end, the effect was almost negligible. After Xiao Yanlong sensed this change, a thick sense of astonishment appeared in his eyes. This move of his was not only effective against cultivators with a low cultivation base, but even cultivators with a high cultivation base would have no choice but to surrender under this move. Back then, his illustrious reputation had spread because of this move, but he had never thought that it would fail when dealing with these little fellows. Di Yujue, who was originally very worried, heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Bai Li Yanche and the others had actually countered this move. These little guys were really amazing, and even he had to admire them. After seeing this scene, Luo Qinghao was completely dumbfounded. He desperately dragged Di Yujue out. In this short period of time, there were many more wounds on his body. However, Xiao Yanlong was actually blocked by these little fellows. He was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. Crack! As the first crack appeared on the trapping array, it was followed by more cracks like a spider web. In just a breath's time, the trapping array was completely shattered. The trapped cultivators rushed out one after another, full of hatred as they attacked Bailey Hongzhuang and the Dark Cultivators. Just one trapping array and poison had caused many of them to fall. Chapter 61-48. When Xiao Yanlong saw that this move could not achieve the desired effect, his figure dashed out once again, and a fierce attack directly attacked Ling. Previously, Ling was in her dragon form, so it was not so easy for him to attack her directly. However, this was an excellent opportunity. Noticing Xiao Yanlong's attack, Ling figure dashed out, and at the same time, a ball of elemental energy violently attacked. Bang! Xiao Yanlong's fist directly pierced through the ball of elemental energy, and his figure chased after her like a ghost. Since he had already attacked, he must take her life. Otherwise, it would be a real joke. Xiao Yanlong's speed was very fast, and the advantage of his powerful cultivation was completely displayed at this moment. After noticing this scene, Bai Liyan also quickly charged forward. However, Xiao Yanlong's speed was also very fast, and his reaction speed was not weak either. He clearly did not plan to pay attention to Bai Liyan and planned to defeat them one by one. Ling continuous attacks were all broken by Xiao Yanlong. Bang! Suddenly, Xiao Yanlong's palm landed on Ling back. Ling figure immediately flew out in a parabola and landed heavily on the ground. Pfft! A metallic taste came from her mouth and Ling clutched her chest, her breathing weakened. You go to hell first. The others will join you soon. A trace of cruelty flashed across Xiao Yanlong's eyes. These fellows were Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang's wings. After this, Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang's emotions would be greatly affected. Just as Xiao Yanlong's attack was about to land, he suddenly turned around, because Bai Liyan's figure had already rushed over. I never thought that the relationship between these two contracted beasts would be so deep. Xiao Yanlong chuckled. You're clearly a beast king, yet you want to become a human's contracted beast. Don't you feel ashamed? It's better than shamelessly living in this world like a guy like you. Bai Liyan did not care about this at all. Thinking back to when he first knew about this moment, many people had such thoughts. However, he had never felt regretful about this. On the contrary, he felt that this was a gift from God. Otherwise, as a beast king, what was the point of living alone and powerful? Master, we can't hold them off. Xiao He and Xiao Bai tried their best to stop the cultivators, fearing that they would affect Di Beichen and the others. However, there were just too many of them. Even with the help of the cultivators from the Di family and Lin family, the cultivators from the 5 major guilds were just like ferocious beasts. After all, the Beast King, the Beast, he was the Beast King, the Beast, the Beast King, the Beast was the Beast King. This move was about to succeed. Huang Fu Ting and the others looked at Di Beichen, who was in the center. Dense dark energy enveloped him, and a mysterious and obscure incantation came out of his mouth. At this moment, he felt that Di Beichen was not their young master, but a god that they looked up to. This kind of power was not something that they could possess. Not only Huang Fu Ting, but Nangong Yuqing and the others also saw it clearly. Di Beichen is summoning an army of skeletons. Nangong Yuqing recognized at a glance. Back in the immortal cloud realm, Di Beichen had used this move. At that moment, he was like a demon god, looking down on the world with disdain. That kind of aura was still engraved in Nangong Yuqing's mind. Because it was too shocking, it was impossible to forget. Chapter 61-49. Summoning an army of skeletons? The Nangong family head looked at Di Beichen in surprise. After seeing how long it took for Di Beichen to use this technique, he was curious. What kind of technique would require the power of so many people? It wasn't until he heard this that he finally understood. Everyone knew that dark attribute cultivators could summon an army of skeletons. However, it had been too long since a dark attribute cultivator had appeared, so they had never seen this technique before. That's right. When I first saw Di Beichen use this technique, it was the same. Now that I think about it, Bailey Hongzhuang must have transferred her power to Di Beichen. Nangong Yuqing narrowed his eyes. At that time, he had never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang also had the dark attribute. Now that he thought about it, he finally understood. Bailey Hongzhuang raised the poison powder in her hand again, and the cultivators quickly retreated. They had already seen how powerful the poison powder was. Many people had died because of it, and they didn't want to experience it again. Seeing that the cultivators had retreated, Xiao He and Xiao Bai heaved a sigh of relief. Even if it was only for a moment, it would be good. Seeing the injuries on Xiao He and Xiao Bai, Bailey Hongzhuang felt a little distressed. Fortunately, the two of them had already taken the pills, so it would take some time for them to recover. Don't worry. Di Beichen is fine, Bailey Hongzhuang said. Hearing this, Xiao He and Xiao Bai's faces lit up with joy. They were completely relieved. That's good. Otherwise, if this continues, we won't be able to hold on. At this moment, Di Beichen's summoning ritual was completed. The dark attribute cultivators heaved a sigh of relief. They didn't expect that they could trust each other enough to do this. However, they were more curious about what their young master had done. That was because they didn't see any special changes in their surroundings. Di Beichen's complexion was somewhat pale, but his pair of black eyes were sparkling, bright, and dazzling. In the past, he only needed the strength of a few people to summon the skeleton army, but this time there were too many opponents, so he had to use more strength to summon the surrounding skeletons. Only in this way would there be a good effect. Lei Ming and the giant beast were fighting fiercely. After seeing that Di Beichen had finished, their faces turned ugly. He didn't expect the other party to have so many people backing them up. They were able to forcefully stop all of this. How hateful! Bang! Di Beichen's leg landed on Xiao Yanlong's body. Xiao Yanlong and Jun Hongqing, these two shameless old fellows, had always maintained a sanctimonious image. Today, they could no longer hold it in. Di Beichen. Xiao Yanlong's face darkened. He turned to look at his surroundings and saw that the battle had reached its climax. He never thought that this battle, which he was sure to win, would end up in this situation. You've been using it for so long, but there's no movement at all. Don't tell me you've failed? Xiao Yanlong chuckled. Bang bang! Two more figures appeared not too far away. Ziren and Shangguan Yingying's figures were sent flying. Jun Hongqing's figure flashed and arrived next to Xiao Yanlong. He had been delayed by Ziren and Shangguan Yingying for a while, but he had quickly found a way to deal with them. They're just deliberately mystifying things. Chapter 6150. Rumble. A series of muffled rumbles resounded from all directions, as if the earth was quaking and the mountains were shaking. Tap, tap, tap. It was the sound of orderly and hurried footsteps. Just by listening to the sound, one could tell that this team was very large. However, almost all the forces from both sides had gathered here. Who else would come? After hearing this series of sounds, Lei Ming's eyes shone with a trace of joy. Previously, he had been restrained by Di Beichen and the others, so he had specially ordered a practitioner to go to the guild and recruit people. In the entire upper realm, besides the mercenary guild, the large guilds had the most practitioners. However, most of the people who had watched today's ceremony were from the top forces of the upper realm, so they would not participate in this battle. Apart from these people, there were more ordinary practitioners. As long as the guilds were willing to give them some benefits, they would definitely join the battle without hesitation. Now that so much time had passed, perhaps the reinforcements had arrived. Now, they still had a certain advantage. Once the reinforcements joined, the Di family and the Lin family would definitely be defeated. Among everyone, only Nangong Yuqing and the others who knew about Di Beichen's situation knew that this movement was most likely caused by the skeleton army. Heavens, it's actually a skeleton army! This mountain is filled with skeletons. So many skeletons, isn't it a little too scary? So this is what Di Beichen has been doing all this time. He can actually summon a skeleton army. Everyone was dumbfounded. When they saw Di Baichen gathering everyone's strength to prepare this move, they were very curious about what kind of shocking killing move it was. Why would it take so long to prepare? However, they did not expect that Di Baichen was actually summoning a skeleton army. Even in the upper realm, there was no one who did not know about the skeleton army. However, due to the decline of dark attribute practitioners, no one had ever seen anyone who could truly summon a skeleton army. However, today they really saw it. How could this be? Lei Ming stared blankly at the skeletons coming from all directions. They were clearly white bones, but at this moment, they were rushing over with their heads held high like warriors. With a single glance, he was certain that the number of skeletons that had appeared was greater than the number of people they had. The reinforcements didn't come, but the enemy's reinforcements did. No wonder Di Baichen needed to gather so much dark energy. Just the sheer number of skeletons was enough to shock anyone. The cultivators from the Di family and the Lin family were already struggling to hold on. When they saw the skeleton army, they almost lost their balance. Young Master's methods are too terrifying. I've never seen anything like this before. What's there to be afraid of? Now, these skeletons all listen to Young Master's orders and are our allies. Everyone's eyes lit up when they heard this. Normally, when they saw the skeleton army, everyone would run as fast as they could, because these guys' fighting strength was very strong, and they didn't know pain, nor did they know fatigue. They were simply fighting machines. They had never thought that one day, they would be able to fight side by side with the skeleton army. Just thinking about it made them feel that this situation was too interesting. Chapter 61-51. So the rumors are true. The dark attribute can really summon an army of skeletons to fight. Facing these skeletons, the crowd was not afraid at all. On the contrary, they couldn't help but feel excited. They had never known that the dark attribute could be so powerful until they saw Di Baichen's strength. They also never knew that there were so many ways to use the dark attribute, especially its terrifying summoning power. In the past, they could only learn about it from ancient books. They even thought that it was so powerful that it didn't seem real. Only now, after seeing it with their own eyes, did they understand that it was all real. An unprecedented hope and expectation spread in the hearts of the crowd. They had been bullied for too many years. They hoped that one day, they could become a true powerhouse and not have to bear the disgust and discrimination of others. The young master is simply too handsome. Such means are simply crazy. Even if I'm a man, I have to admit that the young master is really too handsome. Many cultivators were already injured. However, at this moment, everyone's heart was only filled with pride and endless longing for the future. Perhaps they could really win today. Even if the 5 major guilds didn't agree, their dark sacred assembly could still be established. What should we do? Luo Qinghao was completely dumbfounded. As his injuries worsened, he could no longer hold Di Yujue back. He had hoped that the battle would end soon, but he didn't expect that the original advantage would no longer exist. On the contrary, the opponent had gained an even greater advantage. With so many skeletons, he could sense that these skeletons were not weak. Once they joined the battle, they would definitely be at a disadvantage. I didn't expect this brat to have so many tricks up his sleeve. Feng Youxian's face was ashen. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. Last night they had clearly discussed everything. However, they didn't expect so many changes to occur. Moreover, all of them were beyond their expectations. Facing so many skeletons, even she couldn't help but feel afraid, let alone ordinary cultivators. Once they charged, they might be able to leave safely. However, it would be impossible for the other cultivators. If they didn't have reinforcements, they might be completely annihilated here. Lei Ming, didn't you say that you sent people to look for help? Where are they? Feng Youxian asked through voice transmission. Lei Ming's face was already extremely ugly. At this moment, when he heard Feng Youxian's question, His face became even uglier. I did send people to look for help. However, they haven't arrived yet. Then what should we do now? Yen Ye's voice was slightly deep, his face extremely solemn. Once this army of skeletons joined the battle, the situation on the battlefield, this was not something that could be done by stalling for time. In fact, under such circumstances, it was impossible for them to stall for time. As guild leaders, they might be able to block these skeletons, but what about the cultivators? They couldn't resist these attacks. Bei Chen, the number of skeletons you summoned this time is quite astonishing. Bailey Hongzhuang looked around with a smile. Now that she was facing these skeletons again, she no longer had the fear and worry she had before. On the contrary, there was a very warm feeling. Chapter 61-52. If it were other cultivators, they wouldn't be able to find a stronger helper before their own strength reached a certain level. However, it was different for dark cultivators. The cultivation of the skeletons they summoned was linked to their strength when they were alive. Just like in the upper realm, many of the skeletons they summoned were powerful existences. With such helpers, the situation would change greatly. This was the biggest trump card they had prepared. This was because they rarely used it. Even if Nangong Yuqing and the others had seen it before, they wouldn't have thought that it would be on such a large scale. Even if the major guilds came to stop them, Emperor Cloud City was still the D family's territory. The number of cultivators they brought wouldn't exceed a certain range. Therefore, even in terms of numbers, they wouldn't be inferior in the slightest. Beichen's methods are really amazing. Lin Wenlan sighed with emotion, and a gratified smile appeared on his face. Even he couldn't help but be shocked by such methods. Kill without mercy. After the skeleton army arrived, Di Beichen suddenly shouted. His loud voice echoed throughout the square, and the determination contained in it made everyone's heart tremble. Di Beichen, are you going to fight all the guilds to the end? Lei Ming's face was gloomy. With the appearance of the skeleton army, he keenly noticed that many cultivators' faces had become pale and nervous. They even vaguely had the idea of escaping. No matter what, he absolutely couldn't let this happen. He knew very well that in such a situation, once the first cultivator left, the other cultivators would follow closely behind and leave. At that time, they would be utterly defeated. If only the 5 of them were left here, it would be a real joke. Listening to Lei Ming's words, Di Beichen couldn't help but laugh. Lei Ming, are you joking? It's obviously you who have been targeting us and trying to kill us. Now you're saying the opposite. Could it be that after becoming a guild leader, your face has become thicker than the city walls? In the face of Di Beichen's merciless mockery, Lei Ming was extremely unhappy, but in the face of the current situation, he had to think of something. As long as their reinforcements arrived, they might still have a chance to turn the situation around. Di Beichen, about this attack. Without waiting for Lei Ming to speak, Di Beichen had already interrupted his words. After the previous interaction, he already understood that this so-called President Lei was a completely shameless person. The change in attitude now was only because they were at a disadvantage. He didn't want this matter to become even more complicated. From the moment Lei Ming said that he wanted to kill all darkness attribute cultivators, they had already decided that they would not rest until one of them was dead. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with admiration as she looked at his unswerving determination. They were responsible for the lives of the dark attribute cultivators, and they had to eliminate all unstable factors. Ouyang Jifeng also gave him an affirmative look. This guy is really cool when he's decisive. The skeleton army joined the battle. Under Di Beichen's guidance, they charged towards the cultivators from the guilds. These skeletons still retained the battle consciousness they had when they were alive. Even if they had fallen, their battle prowess was extremely terrifying. Kill, kill, kill. Chapter 61-53. As far as the eye could see, there were skeletons everywhere. The dark sacred assembly was completely surrounded by an army of skeletons. Not only that, but everyone could also hear the footsteps in the distance. Obviously, more skeletons were rushing over. The spectating cultivators felt their scalps tingle when they saw the army of skeletons. When they encountered the army of skeletons in the past, they already felt that the number of skeletons was astonishing. But compared to the scene before them, it was nothing. Nangong Yuqing couldn't help but shrink his neck. He felt that it wasn't easy for him to stay alive after offending Di Baichen for so long. He decided that he would never offend Di Baichen in the future. Otherwise, he wouldn't be a match for him at all just based on his perverted method. What's more, Di Baichen still had Bailey Hongzhuang by his side. Even President Lei couldn't do anything to her. Wouldn't he be courting death if he went to look for trouble? It wasn't just Nangong Yuqing. All the young cultivators present had the same thought in their minds. Everyone was around the same age. How could Di Baichen and Bailey Hongzhuang be so abnormal? Blood mist filled the sky. The previous scene of the dark cultivators being chased had been completely reversed. On the contrary, the cultivators of the 5 major unions were being chased. The strong smell of blood spread in the air. The army of skeletons unconditionally obeyed Di Baichen's orders. In their eyes, Di Baichen was the supreme king. Huang Fu-ting and the others heaved a sigh of relief. Without the pressure of being pursued, they could be considered to be at ease at this moment. The 5 major union leaders didn't expect that they would have so many helpers. Even if they brought a lot of cultivators this time, it was obviously not enough in front of the endless skeletons. Previously, he had been very worried. He didn't expect the young master to have such a big killer move and reverse everything. As cultivators fell one after another, the dark cultivators didn't have the slightest bit of sympathy. This was because if the situation hadn't changed, they would be the ones being slaughtered. Previously, in just a few short breaths, many of their cultivators had fallen. Right now, he was merely seeking revenge. After all, this hatred had been piled up on them by cultivators of other attributes from the very beginning. They had never taken the initiative to hate the other party, but the other party was not willing to give them a way out, so they could only follow the young master and fight their way out. At this moment, as they looked at the 2 celestial-like figures, there was only worship left in their hearts. When the endless skeletons had appeared, the cultivators from the 5 major guilds had already turned pale. After exchanging blows and understanding the strength of these skeletons, their faces had turned deathly pale. Too strong. Altogether, these skeletons were even stronger than some dark attribute cultivators. The scariest thing was that these skeletons didn't know the concept of exhaustion, nor were they injured. On the contrary, the injuries on their bodies continued to worsen, and they were unable to display their original strength due to fear. Originally, they had thought that they would be able to slaughter their way through the guild's forces and obtain the guild's rewards when they returned. Never had they imagined that the situation would be completely different from what they had imagined. Chapter 6154. President, what should we do now? President, you have to save us. Otherwise, we'll all die here. The group of cultivators desperately resisted the attacks of the skeletons, and at the same time, looked at the 5 presidents for help. If they did not think of a way to stop these skeletons, they would all be annihilated. By then, forget about obtaining benefits, they would even lose their lives. However, when they turned around, everyone realized that the 5 presidents could not even protect themselves at this moment, and their hearts instantly turned cold. When Lei Ming and the others heard the cultivators begging for mercy, they were also extremely anxious. However, in the current situation, they could not even take care of themselves. It was too difficult to stop Di Baichen, unless they agreed to let Di Baichen establish the Dark Sacred Assembly. However, in this way, the reputation of the 5 guild leaders would be completely lost. After all, they had tried their best to stop him in front of everyone, and did not leave any room for negotiation at all. They even threatened to kill all the darkness attribute cultivators. Now that they were no match for him, they changed their stance. Moreover, they did it in front of so many forces. Wasn't this a slap to their own faces? After today, how would they have the face to face others? Diujue was in a good mood now. He was no longer as anxious as before, and he was not in a hurry to leave. He also began to teach Luo Qinghao a lesson with great interest. Hasn't this guy been pestering me and not letting me take the opportunity to leave? Now I'll deal with him calmly. After noticing Diujue's expression, how could Luo Qinghao not understand what he was thinking? He instantly felt even more depressed. Today was simply a hellish day. Not to mention the cultivators who were fighting the skeletons, even he could not protect himself. If this continued, his life would be in Di Beichen's hands. Junhong Qing and Xiao Yanlong's feelings at this moment were as if a bottle of mixed feelings had been knocked over. Most of it was frustration and despair that came from the bottom of their hearts. Today was clearly an opportunity to change everything, but for some reason, the situation had changed again. Not only them, even the 5 guild leaders would be defeated by the D family. At this moment, they felt as if God had been helping the D family. Ever since Di Beichen appeared, it was as if God had been helping them. They thought that they had the upper hand, but God gave the D family and the Lin family an even bigger advantage. This feeling was like a cooked duck flying away. Every time they were happy for a moment, they would receive a cruel blow. This feeling was even more despairing than the initial disappointment. It was precisely because of this that they fell into a predicament step by step. But thinking about it carefully, their calculations were not wrong. It was just that the other party was more skilled. Originally, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were still working together to think of a way to resist Xiao Yanlong and Junhong Qing. However, ever since the appearance of the skeleton army, they had also escaped from that situation. Looking at the skeleton who was fighting with Xiao Yanlong, Xiao He could not help but sigh. Master, this skeleton was really a first-class powerhouse when he was alive. According to their understanding, after a cultivator had fallen, the skeleton would still have a certain amount of strength and fighting instincts, but it would still degenerate compared to when he was alive. However, the degenerated skeleton could still fight on par with them. This showed how powerful he was. Chapter 61-55. The strong smell of blood spread in the air, and the entire dark sacred assembly was dyed red with blood. Bang! Luo Qinghao's figure flew out and fell into the skeletons. He was instantly surrounded by skeletons. Diujue glanced coldly at Luo Qinghao, then landed in front of Junhong Qing. His handsome face was filled with indifference, and his pair of black eyes seemed to have frost that couldn't be melted. Junhong Qing, your plan seems to have failed again, and you've implicated many of the family's cultivators. With his familiarity with the Jun family, he had already seen the cultivators of the Jun family and the Xiao family in the guild's team. These 2 guys were worried about the 1-year agreement, so they wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to deal a heavy blow to them. Junhong Qing's face was ashen. Looking at the face in front of him that was younger than him, all the unwillingness in his heart exploded. Over the years, he had schemed and schemed to defeat the D family. Later, he indeed formed an alliance with the Xiao family. However, he never thought that the final result would be that the 2 families would be defeated by the other party even after joining forces. How ironic was that? Diujue, don't be too arrogant, Junhong Qing said coldly. Diujue chuckled. You've always been the one who planned step by step, but in the end, this is the result. If I kill you today, what do you think will happen to the Jun family's future? As soon as these words came out, Junhong Qing's eyes narrowed, but he saw the strong killing intent in the latter's eyes. Even the last time they met, he had never seen Diujue with such strong killing intent. It seemed that this time, he was really determined to make a move against the Jun family. A trace of fear inexplicably appeared in his heart. It had nothing to do with his life or death, but they were already at a disadvantage today. Once the dark sacred assembly was successfully established, the D family's strength would increase again, and it would be easy to destroy them. Moreover, with so many skeletons, once they rushed into the June family's residence, coupled with the power of the D family, they wouldn't be able to resist at all. His heart turned cold at this moment. He began to regret everything he had done in the past. If his family was exterminated because of his decision, then he would be a great sinner of the June family. Don't forget that the secret key is still in my hands, Jun Hongqing said coldly. Right now, his only bargaining chip was the secret key. Even if the land of heritage can never be opened without the secret key, so what? Du Jue's expression was calm. The land of heritage was indeed very important to them. It would be best if they could open it, but if they couldn't, the status of the D family would not be affected. Anyway, the land of heritage had not been opened for so many years, and the life of the D family was not affected in any way. Jun Hongqing's expression froze, but he didn't know what to say. Du Jue's words were indeed reasonable. No matter how one looked at it, he was destined to be the loser. When Lei Ming rescued Luo Qinghao from the group of skeletons, Luo Qinghao's body was already in a mess, and he didn't have the slightest image to speak of. His clothes were dyed red with blood, and there were countless wounds of various sizes. The skeletons didn't show any mercy, and some of the hideous and terrifying wounds even made one's heart tremble. Luo Qinghao's face was extremely pale. If Lei Ming had been one step slower, his life would have been completely lost here. President Lei, we can't continue like this, or else all of us will die here. Chapter 6156. Although the situation of Feng Yuxian and the others was slightly better than Luo Qinghao's, it was not much better. Everyone, who had already begun to retreat, wanted to end everything even more after hearing this. There were still some cultivators fighting against the skeletons. However, judging from the situation, as long as Di Beichen was not willing to stop, these cultivators would be wiped out sooner or later. By then, the skeletons would be surrounding them. Moreover, Di Linxian and the others were not weak. They had already used all their skills to deal with them, but they were still unable to keep them in check. As for Luo Qinghao, his opponent, Du Jue, was already terrifyingly strong. Since he was already seriously injured, no matter if he stayed in the group of skeletons or continued to face Du Jue, only death awaited him. If Du Jue had not shifted his attention to Jun Hongqing, Luo Qinghao might have already died. Lei Ming, we can't go on like this, Feng Yuxian also said. She was already regretting it to the extreme. If she had known that this would happen, she would have either brought more people or not objected at all. It would be a pity to lose her life for the sake of the guild. Lei Ming looked at the wavering crowd. In fact, his heart had already begun to waver the moment the skeleton army appeared. In the face of such a terrifying force, the few of them were clearly too weak. However, he could not say such a thing. His pride did not allow him to do so. In my opinion, Di Beichen's means are so strong that it's inevitable for him to rise. If he wants to establish the Dark Sacred Assembly, it's useless even if we stop him. Even if he gives up on establishing the Dark Sacred Assembly on the surface and develops it into an underground force, wouldn't it be more terrifying? Yen Ye's expression was solemn. He had never thought of this possibility before. However, after seeing the cultivators' fanatical worship for Di Beichen, he figured it out. If the Dark Sacred Assembly was established, they could still control it more and use the regulations that the major guilds had to follow. However, once the other party developed into an underground force, all the restrictions would be useless. If that was the case, it would only be more terrifying. Lei Ming and the rest had not thought of this point. After hearing Yen Ye's words, they could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. Indeed, compared to establishing the Dark Sacred Assembly, this was a more terrifying outcome. In that case, everyone has the same idea? Thunder's gaze swept across the other four guild leaders. After seeing the four of them nod in agreement, he confirmed his answer. I understand. Lei Ming sighed faintly. His original imposing manner instantly became dispirited. He had been smart all his life, but he never thought that he would lose his dignity in front of a junior today. However, he had no way to change all of this. He was the one who initiated this matter. Now that he had chosen to give up, it was only natural that he would take the lead. Even if it was embarrassing, for the sake of everyone's lives, he had no other choice. Ying-ming, it seems that your judgment is correct. When Chu Yifeng saw the ugly expressions of the 5 guild leaders, he could already guess their decision. He could not help but inwardly sigh. It seemed that his son had really grown up. Whether it was in terms of foresight or boldness, he was stronger than him in these matters. Chapter 61-57. President, they're planning to change their minds. Chu Yingming's voice was calm. This result was not beyond his expectations. From the very beginning, he felt that Di Baichen would win. Although they were young, they were actually very meticulous. Before they did anything, they had already made detailed plans. The head of the Di family had always been a highly respected figure. His wisdom and methods were outstanding even among all the family heads. He was willing to support Di Baichen because he felt that this matter had a chance of success. If I'm not wrong, they're already thinking of retreating. Chu Yifeng sighed. I shouldn't have stopped you. Previously, when Chu Yingming proposed to help the Di family, Chu Yifeng thought about it again and decided not to take the risk. This was because if the Di family failed, their Chu family would also have to pay a huge price. He didn't think that the result would be the same as what Chu Yingming had predicted. They also lost a great opportunity to befriend the Di family. If they missed this opportunity, it would be even more difficult to befriend them in the future. Thinking of this, Chu Yifeng couldn't help but envy the Jiang family and Murong family. Their families also had 2 good sons. Although this decision was very risky, if they won, their future gains would definitely not be small. With the Di family's temperament, after this matter was over, the Jiang family and Murong family would become their best allies. With the friendship of the younger generation, their relationship would become even stronger. Lei Ming pondered for a moment before looking at Di Baichen. His ugly face revealed an awkward expression. Di Baichen, in my opinion, we should reconsider this matter. Bracing himself to say this, Lei Ming felt as if all the strength in his body had disappeared. Even if Lei Ming didn't say it clearly, everyone present understood that he was admitting defeat. Nangong Yu's hand trembled. Sure enough, this kind of scene still happened. From now on, no one in the younger generation would be able to compare to Di Baichen. Following Lei Ming's words, Di Baichen, Bailey Hongzhuang, Ouyang Jifeng, and Mo Yunjue's eyes slightly changed. They all had different thoughts in their minds. Di Baichen chuckled and looked at Lei Ming with ridicule. President Lei, what do you mean by reconsidering? This guy isn't our opponent right now, so he wants to reconsider. Why didn't I hear him say that before? Xiao He didn't mind the anger on his face. Previously, they had always been respectful to the various guild leaders. However, they had been pressuring them step by step, not giving them any room to breathe. If they were the ones at a disadvantage, then Lei Ming and the others would have killed them all without hesitation. President Lei Ming, isn't this shameless? From the moment he put on that face, it was already obvious. Xiao Bai shrugged. Although the 5 presidents were all enemies, it was clear that President Lei was the most annoying. Lei Ming originally thought that Di Baichen would happily end all of this after he said those words. He never thought that Di Baichen still felt that he wasn't clear enough and purposely made him say it clearly. Wasn't this just to embarrass him in front of everyone and make him unable to raise his head again? How despicable! Lei Ming clenched his fists and gritted his teeth as he looked at Di Baichen. He felt as if he was going to go crazy from anger. Chapter 61-58. What I mean is that we no longer object to your establishment of the Dark Sacred Assembly. Lei Ming took a deep breath and gritted his teeth as he uttered the words that made him feel extremely humiliated. Recalling his resolute rebuttal earlier, This was simply a slap in the face. It was not just Lei Ming. Even Feng Yuxian and the others, who had strongly urged Lei Ming to change his words, felt humiliated. They were guild leaders after all and were well-known figures in the upper realm. However, what they had done today was truly unsightly. After today, this matter would probably become a stain in their lives. Who knew how many people would laugh at them? As soon as these words were spoken, Huang Fu Ting and the other dark attribute cultivators' faces lit up with excitement. Heavens, they've agreed to let us establish the Dark Sacred Assembly. This means that we don't have to lower our heads in the future. In the future, we can openly state our attribute. Isn't this all because of the young master? If the young master hadn't used such a trick, they wouldn't have changed their words at all. Everyone knew very well that Lei Ming and the others had been forced to change their words because they could not resolve the situation before them. However, at the same time, this was also the rule that everyone understood. In this world, the rules were set by the strong. As long as one was strong enough, no matter how absurd the things one wanted to do were in the eyes of others, one would be able to succeed. Everyone present could not help but feel shocked. From today onwards, the structure of the upper realm would really change. In the past, everyone had always looked down on dark attribute cultivators. However, after witnessing Di Beichen's methods today, no one dared to look down on him so easily. This was because such methods were simply too difficult to deal with. Di Linxian and the others looked at Di Beichen with joy. Although the process today had been very tortuous, the final result was still very good. However, just as everyone thought that the battle was completely over, Di Beichen's words shocked everyone. How can I believe the words of a person who goes back on his words like you? Di Beichen's expression was cold. Even though they had only interacted for a short period of time, he had already understood that this President Lei was not the upright gentleman that everyone thought him to be. On the contrary, he was narrow-minded. Making such a decision at this moment was only because they were forced to do so. If they were allowed to leave peacefully like this today, no one knew what the final outcome would be. Earlier, Lei Ming had said that he wanted to kill all darkness attribute cultivators. Now, he had changed his mind and agreed to the establishment of the Dark Sacred Assembly? What if this guy went back and said that he was forced to say such words and took the opportunity to attack the Dark Sacred Assembly again? Wouldn't that be terrible? Anyway, for those who had already lost face, losing face again was not important to them at all. Lei Ming's mood was already extremely bad. When he heard Di Beichen's sarcastic words, he suddenly felt his blood boil. He was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. It was already good enough that he agreed. What else did Di Beichen want him to do? Could it be that he wanted him to swear in front of so many people? Luo Qinghao and the others' faces alternated between green and red. Their emotions were extremely complicated. However, Di Beichen's words were not without reason. They had no way to refute him. Chapter 6159. Di Beichen. Lei Ming's tone became heavier, mixed with thick anger, but he forcibly suppressed it. I've already said so much, what else do you want? What else do I want? Di Beichen sneered, his expression indifferent. From the beginning to the end, I should be the one asking you what you want, right? Is it great that you've said so much? I've said so much before, in the face of so many people's pleas. Didn't you completely ignore them? You used your selfish words to shut all of us up. The reason is that you're stronger. Now, Di Beichen's voice was loud and domineering. We're stronger than you. Why should we listen to you? The one who should shut up is you. It's you. A cold shout filled with an aura caused Lei Ming to be stunned on the spot. What did it mean to shoot yourself in the foot? This was it. At this moment, Lei Ming was about to die of anger. As an elder, it was normal for him to preach, but Di Beichen used these words at this moment to counter him, making him unable to refute. Chapter 6160. Even if the Dark Sacred Assembly was successfully established, the fact that Di Beichen had become the president would be criticized by others. It would always be talked about, and there was no way to change it. Didn't you plan to kill us all? Debachin was extremely cold. His dark eyes were bottomless, as if they contained endless coldness, causing people's hearts to palpitate. Killing all the dark attribute cultivators, destroying my family, and killing my friends, wasn't that your plan? Debachin spread out his hands, indicating to the cultivators behind him. You can do the same thing to us, but you think that we can't do it? Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with disgust. Now, she really hated these people's hypocritical faces. They looked high and mighty, as if they were superior to others. Other people's lives were like ants in their eyes, but their own lives were incomparably noble. Wasn't that ridiculous? Feng Yuxian was silent. She suddenly understood why Debachin was so persistent. It was not only for her, but also for his family, friends, and all the dark attribute cultivators who believed in him. He was seeking justice for everyone, because if he agreed so easily, he would not be able to face these people who risked their lives to help him. Feng Yuxian's feelings were extremely complicated. This kind of responsibility was hard to find even in many older people, but she found it in Debachin. Even if she was very dissatisfied with everything Debachin had done, she had to admit that he was indeed a very outstanding young man. The reason why so many people were willing to lose their lives for him was probably because he treated them with sincerity. The 5 presidents did not say anything else. Faced with Debachin's resolute attitude, they knew very well that no matter what they said, it was useless. Today, they could only fight to the end. The sounds of killing filled the sky, and the surroundings of the dark sacred assembly had become a terrifying battlefield. Blood spurted out, and miserable screams were endless. However, from the beginning to the end, those skeletons did not harm any of the cultivators who came to watch the battle. In the beginning, everyone was a little worried when they saw those skeletons appear. Once they were surrounded by those skeletons, even if they wanted to escape, it would be very difficult. Fortunately, these skeletons did not treat them as targets and did not attack them. While everyone was impressed by Debachin's ability to distinguish between kindness and hatred, they were even more shocked by his ability to control the skeleton army. These skeletons didn't seem to be dead at all. Instead, they seemed to be real humans who obeyed Debachin's orders. Lei Ming and the others had no choice but to continue fighting after failing to communicate. However, their hearts were filled with despair. If this continued, they might really lose their lives here. Ta-ta-ta. At this moment, a series of footsteps sounded from behind. Hearing the footsteps, Lei Ming's eyes lit up, and a strong sense of hope appeared in his eyes. Now that the skeleton army had arrived, there was only one possibility for the cultivators to arrive: reinforcements. It must be their reinforcements. Luo Qinghao was also shocked. Regardless of how useful these reinforcements would be, it would be good as long as they could get some help. Just as Lei Ming and the others had guessed, a group of reinforcements had arrived. Everyone's footsteps were firm, and victory was written all over their faces. Chapter 61-61. When the reinforcements arrived, they did not immediately see the 5 guild leaders. The first thing they saw was a horde of ferocious skeletons. The skeletons at the back turned around when they heard the footsteps behind them. They raised their weapons and were obviously preparing for battle. The reinforcements, who originally wanted to perform well today, were completely dumbfounded when they saw this scene. Could it be that they came here today to deal with skeletons? What kind of joke was this? There were skeletons everywhere. They simply did not have enough people. Looking at the orderly skeleton army staring coldly at them, everyone could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. Normally, these skeletons were the last thing they wanted to meet, okay? Am I seeing things? A cultivator said in a daze. His tone was filled with uncertainty. Didn't they say they were going to deal with dark attribute cultivators? Could they be skeletons? The leader was completely dumbfounded. When he left earlier, he did not know that there were so many skeletons here. Based on this situation, It was obvious that the guild leader and the rest were completely surrounded by skeletons. My stomach hurts. I'm in a bad state. I'm afraid I can't help today. I'm really sorry. I'll make a move first. I wouldn't have felt it if you didn't say it. Now that you mention it, my stomach hurts too. I must have eaten something bad during lunch. I can't fight in this state. I'll make a move first. After the first cultivator found an excuse to run away, the other cultivators also found an excuse to run away. Continue to stay here? Unless they were stupid. With so many skeletons around, the moment they entered, they would definitely die. Moreover, according to their judgment, the guild members must have been surrounded. They could not escape even if they wanted to. If they rushed in, they would be courting death. Just as Thunder turned around and was about to summon a group of cultivators to help, he realized that the cultivators had run away as soon as they arrived. They ran away. Thunder was stunned. Why did they run away when they had just arrived? The sudden scene was beyond everyone's expectations. However, the scene of them running away like birds and beasts made them laugh uncontrollably. These guys are not stupid. They knew the current situation and ran away as soon as they could. Actually, under such circumstances, even if rushing in can temporarily alleviate the situation, the end result is still death. 5 guild leaders, you've truly made the wrong decision today. Even if you don't lose your lives here today, you'll still lose all your face. The faces of Yen Yi and the others turned ashen as they felt a burning pain on their faces. It's over, it's all over now. Luo Qinghao's expression was dull, and his eyes were filled with despair. If there was a medicine for regret in this world, he definitely wouldn't have appeared here today. It was no wonder that Chairman Lu had agreed to this matter. Perhaps Chairman Lu had already known all of their methods and knew that this matter was unstoppable. That was why he had agreed on the first day. In fact, even if they were in other places, it would be very difficult for them to deal with such methods, let alone in Emperor Cloud City. More and more cultivators died, and even Thunder was injured. Let alone them, the cultivators from other guilds were the ones who had truly broken down.